Elena Brooks had learned very early in life how to stay quiet. Quiet girls survived longer. Quiet girls weren't noticed when mistakes happened. Quiet girls didn't get blamed as often. And when you were poor, really poor, being invisible was sometimes the only protection you had. That was why Elena kept her head down as she pushed the cleaning cart through the private neonatal wing of St. Grayson Hospital. The polished floors reflected lights so bright they hurt her eyes. This wing wasn't meant for people like her. It was meant for powerful families, elite doctors, and secrets that never made the news. She wasn't even supposed to be there. A nurse had called in sick. A supervisor had shoved a badge into Elena's hand and told her to just help where needed. No explanation. No kindness. Just orders. Then Elena saw the baby. He lay inside a glass incubator at the far end of the room, surrounded by machines that beeped softly as if afraid to be too loud. Doctors in tailored coats stood around him, their faces calm, distant, professional. They spoke in low voices, using words Elena didn't understand but didn't like. Cardiac failure. Unstable physiology. Time of death confirmed. Elena felt something twist in her chest. The baby was too small. Too still. One of the doctors signed a form and handed it to the supervisor. Prepare the body. The father will be informed. Prepare the body. The words landed like a slap. Elena swallowed and stepped closer, even though her instincts screamed that she shouldn't. The baby's skin was pale, almost translucent, but there was no bruising, no trauma. He looked peaceful. Like he was resting, not gone. Wrap him and move on, the supervisor snapped. Don't stand there staring. Elena nodded automatically. She always did. But when she reached into the incubator, her hands began to shake. I'm sorry, she whispered, though she didn't know why. Maybe the baby deserved at least one soft voice. Her fingers brushed his tiny hand. Warmth spread through her palm. Elena froze. Not the fading warmth of a body cooling down. This was alive. Gentle. Steady. Real. Her heart began to race. She pressed her fingers lightly against the baby's chest, barely daring to breathe. The machine said nothing. The room was silent. Then she felt it. A faint movement beneath her skin. A heartbeat. Slow. Weak. Fighting. He's alive, Elena said, her voice barely audible. The supervisor scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. Elena leaned down, resting her ear against the baby's chest. She closed her eyes and listened, not with machines, not with training, but with something deeper. Something human. There it was again. A fragile rhythm refusing to stop. Her voice shook as she spoke louder. His heart is still beating. The room reacted instantly. Doctors turned sharply. One laughed in disbelief. Another looked annoyed. You're not qualified, one said coldly. Step away. But Elena didn't move. If you stop now, she said, tears burning her eyes, you're killing him. That was when the air changed. A presence filled the room, heavy, cold, commanding. Elena felt it before she saw him. A man stepped forward from the shadows near the doorway. He was tall, dressed in black, his posture calm but coiled like a predator at rest. His eyes, deep violet, glowing faintly, locked onto the incubator. Everything else faded. Who touched my son? He asked quietly. The doctors went pale. The supervisor dropped the clipboard. Someone whispered, the Vampire King? Elena didn't understand what that meant, but she understood the grief in the man's eyes when he looked at the baby. Lucien Vermont approached the incubator slowly, as if afraid the child might disappear if he moved too fast. His hand hovered above the glass. They told me you were gone, he murmured. At that moment, the baby's fingers twitched. A collective gasp filled the room. Lucien turned sharply to Elena. You. What did you do? Elena's throat tightened. Nothing special. I just listened. He didn't feel finished. Lucien stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time, not her worn clothes, not her badge, but the courage trembling beneath her fear. You heard a heartbeat no one else could, he said. She nodded. Lucien lifted the baby from the incubator with reverent care. The instant he did, the child stirred and let out a tiny sound, proof of life no one could deny. Doctors fell to their knees. The Vampire King's composure cracked, just slightly. My son lives, Lucien said. Because of you. Elena's legs nearly gave out. She hadn't meant to change anything. She hadn't meant to be brave. She had just refused to let go. And in doing so, she unknowingly stepped into a world of blood, power, and destiny, where a poor, invisible girl had just saved a royal heir and rewritten the future. That night, as Lucien looked down at his child and then back at Elena, one truth became impossible to ignore. The baby wasn't the only miracle in the room. And this was only the beginning. The room did not return to normal after the baby cried. There was no relief, no celebration, only shock, fear, and something heavier that pressed against the walls like an approaching storm. Doctors who moments earlier had dismissed Elena now avoided her eyes. The supervisor stood frozen, lips trembling as if afraid that a single word might end her life. Elena barely noticed any of them. Her entire world had narrowed to the tiny child now breathing softly in the Vampire King's arms. Lucien Vermont did not cradle his son the way a human father would. There was no awkwardness, no uncertainty. He held the baby with absolute confidence, as though the child had always belonged there, as though nothing in the world had the right to take him away. The baby's eyes fluttered open. Violet. Bright and impossible. Elena's breath caught. Newborns weren't supposed to focus, weren't supposed to see. But the child did. His gaze moved past Lucien's chest and locked onto her face. And then he reached. A tiny hand stretched outward, fingers curling weakly in the air. Lucien noticed. His body tensed. Slowly he turned, following his son's gaze until his eyes met Elena's. The room seemed to shrink. You, Lucien said quietly. Elena's knees felt unsteady. I'm sorry if I did something wrong. Lucien studied her for a long moment. Not with anger. Not with suspicion. With curiosity. He wants you, Lucien said. Before Elena could react, Lucien stepped closer and carefully placed the baby into her arms. The instant she touched him, the child relaxed completely. His breathing steadied. The faint glow beneath his skin softened, as if whatever force had been raging inside him finally found peace. A soft sigh escaped the baby's lips. Lucien's eyes widened. No one spoke. He hasn't done that, Lucien murmured. Not once. Elena looked down at the baby, heart pounding. He's just tired. He fought hard. Lucien tilted his head slightly. You speak as though you understand him. I don't, Elena said honestly. But I know what it's like to be ignored. To be told you don't matter. Something flickered in Lucien's expression, something old and painful. Behind them, one of the doctors cleared his throat nervously. My lord, the Vampire Council has already been notified of the child's death. Lucien turned slowly. The warmth vanished from the room. Why? He asked. The council has strict laws, the doctor stammered. Hybrid births are considered unstable. Dangerous. The report was meant to erase him, Lucien finished. The doctor collapsed to his knees. Lucien didn't touch him. He didn't need to. His presence alone crushed the air. My son breathes, Lucien said coldly. Which means someone lied. The lights flickered violently. Machines sparked. The walls groaned. Lucien turned back to Elena, his voice lowering. You are no longer safe here. Her heart raced. I didn't mean to get involved. I know, Lucien interrupted. That is why you are dangerous. Elena stared at him, confused. Kindness, Lucien continued, is rare in my world. And in yours it is punished. He gestured sharply. The doors to the ward sealed themselves with a heavy clang. We are leaving, Lucien said. Elena clutched the baby tighter. I can't just disappear. I have a job. I owe rent. I have nothing. Lucien met her gaze. You have everything they fear. He snapped his fingers. A man in black appeared, placing documents on the counter. Elena caught glimpses of numbers that made her dizzy. Debts cleared, accounts closed, obligations erased. Your old life is finished, Lucien said calmly. Whether you wish it or not. Tears welled in Elena's eyes. You're taking my choice away. Lucien's expression softened slightly. No. I am keeping you alive. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, security responding too late. Lucien stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. The council does not forgive miracles. They destroy them. Elena looked down at the baby who had fallen asleep again, his fingers still wrapped around hers. She made a choice then. Okay, she whispered. I'll go. Lucien nodded once. As they left the hospital, the night air felt sharp and unreal. Elena glanced back at the building that had been her entire world just hours ago. She had entered it invisible. She left carrying a royal heir and standing beside the most powerful vampire alive. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the city, the council was already watching, preparing to reclaim what they believed should never have survived. Elena didn't know it yet, but she had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. And the Vampire King was no longer watching her out of curiosity. He was watching her because she mattered. Elena had expected Lucien's world to feel unreal. What she hadn't expected was how aware it felt. The journey away from the city blurred together in her memory, dark windows, silent roads, forests that seemed to stretch forever. The vehicle moved too smoothly, too fast, as if distance itself had lost meaning. Elena held the baby close the entire time, afraid that if she loosened her grip even slightly, reality would snap back and she'd wake up in the hospital again. But she didn't wake up. The castle rose from the mist like something pulled from an old nightmare. Massive stone towers, sharp edges, walls etched with symbols that glowed faintly as Lucien approached. Gates opened without a sound, recognizing him the way a living thing recognizes its master. Elena's breath caught. "This is where you live?" she whispered. Lucien, seated across from her, shook his head slightly. "This is where I rule." Inside, the air was colder than the hospital, but not empty. It pressed against her skin, curious, testing. Servants bowed deeply as they passed, never quite looking at her face. Some stared at the baby instead, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. They knew. They all knew what the child represented. Lucien led her through corridors older than any building she'd ever seen. The walls whispered faintly, though Elena couldn't understand the words. Still, she felt them, questions, warnings, recognition. When they reached the nursery, Elena stopped short. The room was beautiful in a severe, ancient way. Stone carved with protective runes surrounded a cradle made of black crystal. Magic hummed in the air, dense and powerful, like electricity before a storm. "This was prepared before his birth," Lucien said quietly. "Every protection my world knows." Elena stepped inside. The moment she crossed the threshold, the baby stirred. His breathing hitched. His tiny hands clenched. The glow beneath his skin brightened rapidly. The runes ignited. Crimson light flooded the room. The stone floor cracked with a sound like thunder. Lucien moved instantly, placing himself between Elena and the walls. "Stay back." Fear surged through Elena's chest, but she didn't move away. The baby began to cry. Not a normal cry. It was sharp, unnatural, filled with raw power. The castle responded violently. Chandeliers shook. Doors slammed. The runes flared brighter, feeding the chaos instead of calming it. "He's hurting," Elena said, panic rising. Lucien's jaw tightened. "The magic is overwhelming him. Hybrids aren't meant to channel this much power so soon." The walls cracked again. Elena didn't think. She stepped forward and hugged the baby to her chest. "It's okay," she whispered, rocking him gently. "I've got you." The effect was immediate. The cry softened. The glow dimmed. The runes flickered, then steadied. The cracks sealed themselves like scars fading from skin. The castle exhaled. Lucien stared at her, stunned. "You didn't block the magic," he said slowly. "You absorbed it." Elena shook her head. "I didn't do anything special. I just held him." Lucien laughed quietly, but there was no humor in it. Only disbelief. "For centuries we've controlled power through domination. Through force. And you," he gestured helplessly. "You quiet it with compassion." Elena looked down at the baby, now sleeping peacefully against her heart. "He doesn't need power right now. He needs safety." Lucien said nothing for a long time. That night, Elena was given chambers beside the nursery, not below it, not guarded like a prisoner, but placed exactly where she needed to be. Guards lined the halls, yet she sensed they weren't watching her. They were watching for her. As she lay awake, listening to the castle's low hum, Elena felt the weight of something immense settling over her. She wasn't just a guest. She wasn't just a caretaker. The castle had responded to her presence. To her voice. To her heart. And far beyond those ancient walls, forces older and crueler than Lucien were beginning to stir, drawn by the impossible truth that a poor human girl had done what centuries of vampire power could not. She had calmed the air. She had been heard. And nothing in that world would ever be the same again. Morning did not arrive in Lucien's castle the way Elena understood mornings. There was no sunrise spilling through curtains, no birdsong easing the night away. Instead, the darkness thinned. Shadows retreated slowly, like obedient servants, and the air grew warmer by degrees so subtle she only noticed when she exhaled and no longer saw her breath. Elena woke with the baby sleeping against her chest. For one terrifying second she forgot where she was. Stone walls. Heavy silence. Power humming beneath the floor. Then memory returned all at once. The hospital, the truth, the castle that listened. She looked down at her son. His eyes were open. Not glowing. Not burning with magic. Just watching her, calm and strangely aware. "Good morning," she whispered. A soft warmth pulsed through her chest, like a gentle echo answering her words. The baby's lips curved, not a smile exactly but something close. Elena's throat tightened. Whatever he was, whatever his future held, this moment felt achingly human. A knock came at the door. Lucien entered without waiting for an answer. He looked different in daylight, or whatever passed for it here. Less monstrous. More tired. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and the weight he carried seemed heavier than the night before. "The council has convened," he said. Elena stiffened. "The council?" "The ancient houses," Lucien explained. "The ones who believe my rule exists only to preserve tradition." "And my baby?" Her arms tightened instinctively. Lucien met her gaze steadily. "They believe he should not exist." Silence pressed in around them. "They want to kill him," Elena said flatly. "Yes." The word fell like a blade. Elena stood. Fear rose in her chest, sharp and blazing, but beneath it was something new, anger. Not wild, helpless anger. Focused. Protective. "No," she said. "They won't." Lucien's lips curved slightly. "That," he said softly, "is exactly why they fear you." The council chamber was vast and circular, carved deep into the mountain beneath the castle. Ancient thrones ringed the room, each occupied by a vampire older than Lucien's reign, creatures whose power pressed against Elena's senses like a physical force. Eyes turned toward her the moment she entered. Whispers followed. "Human. Mother. Weak. Threat." Lucien took his seat at the center throne. Elena stood beside him, refusing the lesser chair offered to her. She held the baby openly, daring anyone to object. An elder rose, tall, bone-thin, eyes like dried blood. "This child is an abomination," he declared. "A dilution of our bloodline." The baby stirred. The chamber trembled. Cracks spidered across the stone floor beneath the elder's feet. Lucien lifted one finger. The tremor stopped instantly. "You will speak carefully," Lucien said coldly. Another council member leaned forward. "The hybrid threatens balance. Already the castle bends to him." To her. Her gaze fixed on Elena with naked hostility. Humans were never meant to wield influence here. Elena felt the pressure build, the magic reacting to their aggression. She lowered her head, not in submission but to whisper softly to her son. "It's okay. I'm here." The glow flickered, and faded. A ripple of shock passed through the chamber. "She silences him," one elder whispered. "Without spells." Lucien rose slowly to his full height. "This child is my heir," he announced. "And he lives." The elder sneered. "You would risk war for sentiment?" Lucien's eyes burned. "I would end worlds for him." The room fell silent. But it wasn't Lucien's threat that broke the council. It was Elena. She stepped forward. "I don't understand your laws," she said, voice steady despite the fear clawing at her insides. "I don't understand your magic. But I understand children. And this one," she held him closer, "is not your weapon or your curse. He's a life you're afraid of because you can't control him." A low hiss spread through the chamber. "You think compassion makes you strong?" An elder spat. Elena met his gaze. "No. I think fear makes you weak." The baby laughed. A soft, bright sound, pure and unmistakable. The chamber listened. Stone warmed. Shadows retreated. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by something lighter, unfamiliar. Hope. Lucien looked at his son with something like wonder. The eldest vampire rose slowly, ancient eyes narrowing. "The castle has chosen," he said reluctantly. "It recognizes the mother." Murmurs erupted. "The old magic responds only to sovereign blood," another protested. "Or to truth," the eldest countered. Lucien's voice cut through the noise. "This council is dismissed." No one argued. They couldn't. That night, Elena stood on a balcony overlooking the endless dark forests. Lucien joined her, silent. "You defied them," he said at last. She didn't look at him. "I would do worse for him." Lucien nodded slowly. "You have altered the balance of my world." Elena glanced down at the baby, sleeping peacefully. Then maybe it needed changing. Lucien watched mother and child, realization settling deep in his chest. The greatest threat to his enemies was not the hybrid heir. It was the human woman who taught monsters how to feel again. The first scream tore through the castle just after the shadows deepened. Elena woke instantly. Her body moved before her mind could catch up, years of fear, motherhood, and instinct colliding into one sharp certainty. Something was wrong. The baby stirred against her chest, eyes flashing faintly silver as the air itself trembled. "No," she whispered, rocking him. Stay calm. Mama's here. The hum beneath the stone floor had changed. Where it had once felt steady, protective, it now pulsed unevenly, like a wounded heart. Then the castle rang with the sound of steel. Lucien appeared at the doorway in a blur of motion, already armored, eyes burning red. They've breached the eastern ward. Elena's blood ran cold. The council? Not officially, Lucien said grimly. Which makes it worse. Traitors. The word didn't need to be spoken aloud. She felt it in the way the shadows twisted, in the way the baby's tiny fingers clenched against her shirt. They're coming for him, she said. Yes. Lucien knelt in front of her, gripping her shoulders. Listen to me. There is a passage beneath the nursery. It will take you beyond the castle's borders. Elena shook her head violently. No. I'm not running. This is not a debate, Lucien snapped, and then stopped himself. His voice softened. Please. If they reach him. If they reach him, Elena interrupted, they'll have to go through me first. For a moment Lucien looked like a man torn in half. King and father. Monster and protector. Then the wall shook again, closer this time. Lucien cursed under his breath and stood. Then stay behind me. They didn't reach the passage. The traitors struck before Elena could take 3 steps. The door exploded inward, stone splintering like bone. Vampires poured in, faces twisted, eyes wild with hunger and fear. Not soldiers. Fanatics. Kill the hybrid, one screamed. The baby cried out. Power surged. The room lit crimson as the child's magic flared instinctively, responding to danger. The runes shattered completely, fragments lifting into the air as if gravity itself had lost its grip. Lucien unleashed hell. He moved like living shadow, faster than Elena could track. Screams echoed as traitors were thrown against walls, crushed, torn apart. Blood splattered the stone floor, steaming where it landed. But there were too many. One slipped past Lucien's guard, young, desperate, trembling with fanatic belief. He raised a blade etched with ancient sigils, meant for ritual execution. Elena stepped forward. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She looked the vampire in the eye and said, "Stop." The word carried weight. Not magic. Not command. Truth. The blade wavered. The baby's cry softened into a low hum, warm and steady. Light spilled outward, not burning, not violent, but calming like moonlight on water. The vampire dropped the weapon. He fell to his knees, clutching his head. "Make it stop," he sobbed. "I can hear him. He's not evil." Lucien froze. So did the castle. The remaining attackers faltered, confusion rippling through them like a sickness. Their rage dimmed, replaced by doubt. Fear. Shame. One by one they fled. Silence fell heavily in their wake. Elena's knees buckled. Lucien caught her before she hit the floor. For the first time since she'd known him, his hands shook. "You should have died," he said hoarsely. "They all should have tried to kill you." Elena looked up at him, exhausted, tears streaking her face. "I know." Lucien laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound. "You stood unarmed before executioners." "I wasn't unarmed," she said, glancing down at the baby now sleeping peacefully again. "I had him." Lucien stared at his son. At the impossible calm left behind. At the traitor still kneeling, weeping, unable to lift his head. "They felt it," Lucien whispered. "His nature. Not destruction. Balance." The realization hit him like a blade to the chest. All his life, power had meant dominance. Fear. Control. And here was a child who could unmake violence simply by existing. That night, Lucien ordered the castle sealed. Not against enemies. Against fear. He summoned the remaining council members, not to threaten them, not to negotiate. To show them the truth. They stood in the ruined nursery, staring at the broken runes, the softened stone, the human woman cradling a child who had ended a rebellion without spilling blood. "This is the future," Lucien declared. "Adapt, or be left behind." No one challenged him. Later, as dawnless morning crept in, Elena sat by the window watching shadows thin once more. Lucien stood beside her, quiet. "You were right," he said at last. "This world needed changing." Elena smiled faintly. "It's not done yet." Lucien looked at her, really looked at her, not as a fragile human, not as a temporary presence, but as something permanent. Essential. "You are no longer a guest here," he said. "Nor merely the mother of my heir." She raised an eyebrow. "Then what am I?" Lucien bowed his head, not as a king but as a man. "You are the heart of this kingdom." Elena tightened her hold on her son, feeling his warmth, his quiet strength. Outside the castle, the world shifted. Not toward darkness, but toward something new. And the night would never rule the same way again. Change did not arrive with trumpets or fire. It arrived quietly. Elena noticed it first in the way the castle breathed. The stone no longer hummed with tension. Shadows still lived in the corners, but they no longer pressed inward, no longer watched with suspicion. Even the air felt different, lighter, as if the castle had finally released a breath it had been holding for centuries. The baby slept peacefully in her arms. Not glowing. Not radiating power. Just sleeping. Lucien stood beside her on the highest balcony, the wind tugging at his dark cloak. Beyond the walls stretched forests older than empires, their canopies rolling like a black sea. This had always been his kingdom, endless night, endless control. Yet for the first time, it did not feel complete without the small human heartbeat pressed against Elena's chest. The outer houses have responded, Lucien said quietly. They felt the shift. Elena didn't ask how. She had learned that some truths in this world simply were. And, she asked. They are afraid, he admitted. But fear is different now. It isn't aimed at the child. Elena looked down at her son. His fingers curled reflexively around hers, warm and trusting. Then who are they afraid of? She asked softly. Lucien met her gaze. The future. The coronation was unlike any that had come before it. There was no blood oath. No execution to mark the beginning of a reign. The council gathered in the great hall, not armed, not defiant, but uncertain. Ancient vampires stood shoulder to shoulder with younger ones, all drawn by something they could not ignore. At the center of the hall stood Elena. Not on a throne. Not kneeling. Standing. Lucien knelt before her. The gasp that rippled through the hall was sharp and collective. Kings did not kneel. Not in this world. Not ever. Lucien bowed his head. By ancient law, he declared, voice echoing through stone and bone, the castle recognizes its heart. The heir's protector. The one who binds power to purpose. Elena's breath caught. This is not my world, she whispered. Lucien looked up at her, eyes steady. It is becoming one. He rose and turned to the assembly. My son will rule one day. Not as a weapon. Not as a god. But as a bridge. Murmurs spread, fearful, awed, uncertain. Elena will stand as guardian of the dawn, Lucien continued. Her voice will temper our laws. Her presence will anchor our power. An elder stepped forward slowly. And if we refuse? The baby stirred. The hall warmed. Not with fire, but with life. Stone brightened subtly, veins of old magic glowing gold instead of red. The oppressive weight that had once crushed even the strongest vampires lifted, replaced by something unfamiliar. Lucien did not threaten. He simply said, then you may leave. No one did. That night, Elena walked the castle halls freely for the first time. Doors opened before her. Servants bowed, not out of fear but respect. The castle itself responded to her steps, smoothing rough stone, softening edges. She paused outside the nursery watching Lucien cradle their son. He looked terrified. And human. He scares me, Lucien admitted without looking up. Not his power. The way he makes me want things I never allowed myself to want. Elena smiled faintly. Like peace. Like hope, he corrected. Days passed. Then weeks. The attack stopped. The whispers faded. Some houses left, retreating into old darkness. Others stayed, adapting slowly, painfully, learning restraint instead of dominance. And beyond the borders, something impossible began to happen. The land changed. Plants grew where nothing had grown before. Animals returned to forests long emptied by fear. Humans traveling near the borders reported strange dreams, of warmth, of safety, of a night that watched without hunger. Elena stood at the edge of the realm one evening, the baby asleep in a sling against her chest. Lucien joined her, silent. The world will come for him someday, Elena said. Not today. But someday. Lucien nodded. And when it does? She turned to him, eyes steady. Then we teach him who he is before they tell him what to be. Lucien smiled, truly smiled, for the first time since she'd met him. The castle chimed softly as if in agreement. Far above, the sky lightened, not with sunlight but with something gentler. A pale glow spread across the horizon, neither day nor night. A dawn that belonged to no one. Elena felt it then, fully and finally. She had not been brought to this world by accident. She had not survived by chance. She was the beginning of a story this realm had been waiting to tell. And in her arms slept the child who would end an age not with fire or blood, but with balance. The night still existed. But it no longer ruled alone. And for the first time in centuries the darkness welcomed the light.